All right, let's testify tonight. Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord. But you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Because the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it up. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing it. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
And, excuse me, good morning to anybody who's, see, Josiah's in the chat, anybody else that's here, and anybody that comes in later or is lurking, welcome. I hope you are doing well this Friday morning as we continue to go through these interesting times. Interesting, it's the only word I can come up with. It's been, it's been an interesting couple of weeks, honestly. You had the whole ice shooting thing the heated debates between liberals and conservatives in this country. And I think a fundamental loss of any kind of critical thinking, which is nothing really all that new. It's just, I think, highlighted by the reaction to the ICE shooting. That both sides show how they are fundamentally flawed in their thinking, in that they just draw their conclusion first and then look for evidence to support it, as opposed to look at the evidence and see what conclusion it merits. You know, which is honestly terrible to see this happening to our society. But it's not, shall we say, unexpected. And so, then on top of that, we of course got, speaking of lack of critical thinking, we have the premiere of Starfleet Academy, which we'll be talking about in detail on Nerd Fights tonight. Obviously, I think that a lot of people have decided long before it came out that this was going to be the worst show ever. Now, I have said I wasn't expecting much out of it based on the trailers for it. So, but at the same time, like with any show, movie, whatever that I watch, I try to go in as dispassionately as possible and see it for what it is, as opposed to judging a book by its cover, so to speak, and saying that this is going to be bad because I don't like the trailer, or to even just say this is going to be bad because it was produced by Alex Kurtzman or something. Or like we were talking about Star Wars, oh, this is bad because Kathleen Kennedy was behind it, that kind of thing. And so I watched Starfleet Academy, and I haven't watched it a second time yet, but I plan to, because I am probably going to break it down a little bit in the future. However, I have to say, and some people get pissed off at me. It's not great. It's certainly not a wonderful show, or even a wonderful Star Trek show. It is not horrible, which is going to piss some people off. And it's simply it's kind of in the middle as far as modern Star Trek is concerned. This is the fifth show to be produced since the rebirth of Trek a few years ago. And I would put it smack dab in the middle as far as where I would rank it. Right now, as far as new Trek, I think Strange New Worlds would be number one, Lower Decks would be number two, this would be number three, Picard would be number four, and Discovery would be number five. And so it is. It does have potential. I gotta say. However, based on the setup from the first two episodes, I'm not really expecting it to live up to its potential, and we'll talk about that more tonight. So let's see, and yet one of my wonderful friends whose name I can never pronounce right, Waves. How you doing? Josiah says Disney has really destroyed Star Wars. You see, this is. I'm sorry, that's just not true. All right, so Disney didn't destroy Star. Even first of all, Star Wars has not been destroyed. All right, yes, there has been some bad Star Wars to come out in recent years, but there's also been some good Star Wars to come out in recent years. And so I'm sorry, Disney didn't destroy Star Wars. And even if you do consider Star Wars to be destroyed, it would be Lucasfilm that destroyed Star Wars. A lot of people think that somehow, like, Disney comes in and takes over the company and dictates everything about what's going to happen. That's not how Disney operates, despite what you might have seen on Nerdrotic or Doomcock's channel. The way that Disney operates is that they buy these properties and they say, okay, make us money. And so that's why, like, keep in mind that, like, people say, oh, Disney ruined the MCU because look at all the crap that came out after Endgame when Disney was running things. The problem is that Disney's been running things since the first Avengers film. And so, most of the Infinity Saga was under Disney. It's because what Disney does is it acquires these properties and then just basically, Disney doesn't micromanage for the most part. They just say, make us a bunch of money and we're happy. The only time Disney steps in is when things start to crumble, which happened a little bit in recent years, which is one of the reasons that you're seeing both the MCU and Star Wars kind of retool a little bit. And at least in the MCU, I think we've seen some very positive results. So I think it's unfair. I understand villainization of Disney is a very popular thing to do online, but I think it's quite frankly silly. Am I a big fan of the Disney Corporation? Not at all. There are some things that the Disney Corporation does that I don't like, but I'm also not going to unfairly villainize the corporation, suggesting that everything that's wrong with some of their franchises is just because Disney. And I understand the temptation to do that. It's an easy scapegoat, but it's a false one. In the middle isn't good news for any show. I would tend to say yes with that. I mean, like, it doesn't have a strong start as Strange New Worlds did. But then I think Picard started out feeling like it was going to be better than it was. And the only show that I honestly, as far as new Trek, I think Lower Decks was fairly consistent. Their humor got a little too crass around season 3, but then they pulled that back. But I think you look at Discovery. Discovery started off with one of their very worst episodes. The Vulcan Hello was an absolute insult to all things Star Trek. And for those of you that don't know, that's the name of the first episode of Discovery. The So this show opening up basically in the middle of the pack. Well, I can say that it's not a disaster dumpster fire like Discovery was right out of the gate. I don't know if it'll end up as bad as Picard by the time we end up with the season. But of course, for all we know, it'll be awesome by the end of the season. I doubt it. I have a feeling it's going to probably stay right where it is as far as my ranking, but we'll find out. And let me see. Make sure that wasn't anything important. No, it was not. All right. Josiah says no one's really talking about Star Wars. See, that's patently false. The problem with statements like that is it just means the people you talk to aren't talking about Star Wars. There are thousands, if not millions, of people around the world talking about Star Wars right now. It's just that you're not listening to them. So there are there are dozens and dozens of channels on YouTube, hundreds probably, maybe even thousands of channels on YouTube just dedicated to talking about Star Wars that are doing just fine. It's just that right now, Star Wars doesn't have anything new out, and so there's not much to talk about. Just like with the MCU, haven't talked about that much lately because Wonder Man's not out yet, and honestly, Wonder Man doesn't look like it's going to be like anything groundbreaking. I think we're going to start talking about the MCU a lot when Spider-Man comes out in a couple of months, but and we'll be speculating about what's going to happen Doomsday. But and the only reason we're talking about Star Trek right now is because Academy just came out. But 2 weeks ago we weren't talking about Star Trek very much, and I love talking about Star Trek. So I think that you confuse chatter with quality. Just because there's chatter about something doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. It just means that it happens to be the topic of the day on the channels that you happen to subscribe to. Robert says, didn't even know you were streaming, didn't get a notification. I'm sorry. Yeah, YouTube and their notifications a little wonky. I don't know what to say. Sometimes people get notifications, sometimes they don't. I miss the old YouTube. I think that, and this is where I will blame a corporation. I think that Google taking over YouTube was horrible because YouTube, prior to Google buying it, was truly what you would describe as a social media platform. It was meant to be people communicating with other people like you and me, just talking, right? Whether now it wasn't really into live streaming yet, but live streaming wasn't even a thing yet. But it was people posting videos, just spouting their opinions about whatever. Other people would post response videos or comments, and things conversation would ensue. But then when Google took over, they did actually and I remember, because remember, I've been on YouTube for close to 20 years. I've been on YouTube since YouTube started, and when Google took over, they actually made it very clear from the beginning that their intent was to make YouTube a platform for corporate videos, things like ABC, NBC, Comedy Central. That's where they wanted their bread and butter to be. They wanted to be a competitor to cable, which they've kind of become. A lot of people like YouTube TV. A lot of people pay money to YouTube to watch TV, and so YouTube has successfully rebranded themselves or as a streaming service, like Netflix, Disney Plus, all that, as opposed to a social media site. And I think that's too bad because I really enjoyed the social media aspects of YouTube. And it's why it's so hard for anyone to get an audience unless they are an extremist of some kind. And so, which is, just and which is just the way it is. And so one of the things that they do not emphasize small channels like me. They don't emphasize, just conversational live streaming and stuff. They want the big money. And so they don't care about people like me. And it's a business decision. I know, obviously, I'm not going to like it because it affects me in the negative, but I think it's a mistake in the long run because there already are a million big corporate streaming services, right? If I want to watch Disney content, I'll go to Disney Plus, not YouTube. Josiah says, "Do you understand the meaning behind the song 'I'll Do Anything for Love' by Meatloaf?" I don't give a crap about Meatloaf, the artist. I've never cared about Meatloaf. I know who he is or was. I don't know if he's still alive, but yeah, don't care. I heard they're dropping all of Wonder Man episodes at once. I have not heard that, but if so, awesome. I prefer binging. And it could, I don't know if Wonder Man is as a leftover from the previous administration, if you will, under Feige, where they were just kind of dumping out content, or whether or not this is supposed to be part of the new guard of things. Because one of the things that they've talked about when they kind of started retooling in the MCU is that they were going to reserve the streaming service was going to be for street level characters, and the movies were going to be for so-called cosmic level characters, right? So you would see the Fantastic Four in films, but you would see Daredevil in streaming, right? Now, Spider Man technically should be on the streaming side because he's a street level character, but we'll see what happens to him in the long term. Which I think a Spider Man streaming show would be awesome. However, we don't know. We'll see. The Wonder Man, he kind of falls in a weird category as far as. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Wonder Man. People like Darren Wagner get all pissed off because Wonder Man in this is black and is a different character setup than the original, but I don't care about that. And I'm not saying I don't care because, I just don't care about caring, following the source material. I'm saying I don't care because I don't know, I don't have anything invested in Wonder Man. I have only a couple of comic books in which he even appears, and I know he was a member of the Avengers. I know that he is extremely powerful as far, like he can go toe to toe with the heavy hitters, with Thor, with Hulk. He is that powerful. But we haven't. Most people haven't heard of him. When it's just he's one of those characters that honestly, outside of him being a member of the Avengers, nobody really gives a rip about him. Now, will this Wonder Man end up being in the Avengers? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. So far, the only character who's transitioned, I think, directly from streaming to film would be Miss Marvel. And the funny thing is, while The Marvels was a flop of a movie, I don't. The sad thing is, I don't think it's because of Miss Marvel. I think Miss Marvel was the best part of that movie. I think that movie was flawed from the beginning. So Marvel doesn't have much face, and I don't. I don't know if it's a excuse me, a strategic thing, or if you're right that Marvel simply doesn't believe that it'll do well. I don't know. Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe neither. They could be experimenting with release schedules to see what profits them the most. And personally, I don't care about whether or not Disney or Marvel or whoever has much faith in a project. I just care about is the project any good. Old YouTube was ancient but great. It feels ancient now, doesn't it? Because it's been quite a. I don't know when Google acquired YouTube, but it's been a while now. And I keep hoping that it will get better, but it doesn't. And yeah. Another thing that really sucks about modern YouTube is the lack of, well, there's no transparency, but I'm trying to think that the lack of resources for small timers. Like if I have a problem with my channel, or a technical problem, whatever, I can reach exactly nobody. You know, they nobody gives a crap about a small channel. Heck, even channels that are like at 100,000 subs now are considered tiny by their standards. So, to get actual customer service from YouTube, you have to be a big channel, and to me, that's always been a sticking point to me from the minute that Google took over, that they kind of implemented this kind of thing. Because it's funny. I do think, and I know this is a Christian principle, but I think it's a true one, is that you can always judge a group, whether it be a corporation or a country or a society or whatever it may be. But you can judge that group by how they treat the least, right? I think Jesus talks about, when a hungry person comes to you, do you give them food or do you shoo them away? And he's saying, as you're doing to them, you are doing to him. That when that homeless person who's begging for food and you've got money in your pocket and you don't share, would you do that if that were literally Jesus sitting there? Obviously, the answer would be no, but we do it anyway. And I'll be honest, this is one of the few areas that I disagree with Pastor Corey from the Experience Community Church on. I love Corey to death. I think he's wise beyond his years. I think that he is a great teacher and preacher, but this is something I just patently disagree with him on. And he believes that you should never, ever, ever give to the homeless. Why? Because in many, if not most cases, these people are on drugs or they are engaging in various illegal activities like prostitution and stuff like that. And so by giving them money, you are supporting these horrible, terrible things. Okay. That is a very fair critique of what happens when you give money to homeless people. And so then Corey's solution is rather than give money to the homeless beggar on the street, that you give money to various charities that try to help the homeless, right? So, for example, our church has a ministry called the 5,000, which is a thing on the whole when Jesus fed the 5,000. And that ministry goes out on Sunday mornings and feeds the homeless, right? That's a great ministry. Don't get me wrong. I totally support what the church does with the 5,000. But the 5,000 ministry helps them one day a week with a meal. They need more than that. They need, and the problem is that, I mean, our church alone can't fix the problem. It would take the combined effort. First of all, if everybody tithed to their church, then churches would have resources. But even then, I don't think most churches have the will to actually go out and deal with the issue. Our church does more than most, but I don't think that any church is going to go out there and start actually, clothing those that are naked and feeding those that have no food and giving housing to those who have no home. I don't see it happening. The government certainly has programs that are supposed to do that, but those programs are constantly either underfunded or extremely inefficient, and usually both. And so, getting the aid to the people that need it is a virtual impossibility. So, where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with people on the streets literally starving, and to me that's horrible. And so one thing that I do as when I'm driving Uber is if people give me a cash tip, particularly they give me $1 bills. I have a little slot in my in my sun visor that I made, and I stick the $1 bills in that. And when I go to the store, if I pay cash, any ones I get in change, I stick in that slot. So I always put my $1 bills in this slot. And when I see a homeless person on the side of the street, grab one of those $1 bills, give it to them. Now, is that going to fix their problem? No. And should I give more? Probably. But I think that it's at least an effort to help those that are at the bottom. And I think that it is incredibly important that we help those at the bottom. And that's something, and that goes not just for as me as an individual, but it means corporations should do this as well. And that means that a good business model is to treat every customer as if they were made of solid gold, right? And that's not the Google attitude. The Google attitude is that if you give us millions or billions of dollars, then we'll talk to you. Other than that, go take a hike. Let's see. I remember I didn't really use it at first as far as YouTube back then. Well, it wasn't as popular then, true. When they first launched, the videos would never play properly for them, so I ignored them for a while. Yeah, it was a little wonky at first, just like, Rumble or any other site. But now it's pretty stable, obviously. YouTube used to be about broadcast yourself. Yes, indeed. Now it's about NBC broadcasting on another platform. I noticed that Netflix advertises on YouTube, but does YouTube advertise on Netflix? Not generally. At least I've not seen it. Now, Meatloaf is dead. He's also in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. yeah, a movie that I tried, I know it was this big cultural phenomenon back in the 80s, and I tried to watch it. I really did. And I thought it was the absolute dumbest thing I'd ever seen in my life when and I couldn't get through the first act of the movie. I've tried several times in my life to watch it, and every time I thought either it's stupid or disgusting or a combination of both. And I don't care for it. I just don't. So if you like that movie, I'm not saying you're a bad person for liking the movie. I think the movie is dumb. Nightwing would be a better Batman than Bruce Wayne. Well, okay, if you say so. I think he did actually take the mantle for a while. Liam Neeson's character in the Taken movies versus James Bond. Remember, he has a specific set of skills. He does have a specific set of skills, but we've never seen, we don't, I don't remember if they ever said in the Taken series why Liam Neeson's character has those particular skills. But I think Liam Neeson is probably a better killer than James Bond. However, does Liam Neeson have, James Bond has virtually unlimited resources, and you know, it's a tough one. It really is, but you know, and also it would vary depending on which James Bond we're talking about. However, generally, I think I would give the edge to Bond because Bond does have the unlimited resources, and both of them are very good at what they do. Well, they released everything else weekly. Not everything. I think that they released a couple of shows all at once. But I prefer, like I said, I prefer all at once over weekly. Except the stinkers, Echo and now Wonder Man. Like Echo and now Wonder Man. It's funny. I thought Echo was another one of those shows that was a great no. Was it horrifically bad? I don't think it really was. I just think that it missed the mark. YouTube is now over 20 years old. Yeah, and in fact, the funny thing is, I have a video from not the first but the second channel that, or actually, I think it's the third channel that I had on YouTube. And I still every now and then it's still out there. You can see it, and the video is marked from 17 years ago, and it's like, wow. I didn't have any gray hair. I was 100 pounds lighter. Yeah. So I miss those days. There was some bad stuff that was being posted to YouTube back in the day. I seen these videos. Well, okay, when you say bad stuff, I assume I remember in the early days of YouTube, people would post like porn or graphic videos of people being killed or whatever, and YouTube would pull the videos down, but this was before the invention of the almighty algorithm, and so it would sometimes be up for days or even weeks before it got pulled down. But YouTube was pulling those kinds of things down as quickly as they possibly could. I think that it's kind of interesting because at what point does an industry like video sharing like this become too big? Because I honestly think that humans should be doing all the reviewing. I don't think machines should be taking down videos because there were a lot of cases once, especially when the algorithm was first implemented, where videos were being taken down left and right for no good reason whatsoever. And even to this day, and this is why I get on people sometimes for throwing certain words into the chat. Because if you start talking about the Germans from the 1940s by their proper name, or the leader of the Germans from the 1940s by his proper name, right? As soon as you start talking about them, you run the risk of having your video at the very least demonetized or possibly taken down. If you talk about adults who are amorous towards children, and it doesn't matter, you could be talking about how disgusting it is, how vile it is, and how terrible it is, and you can still get your video taken down just because you're talking about it. And so I don't like the replacement of humans with algorithms as far as the enforcement of the terms of service. I think that only humans should do it. However, it's their company and they can do what they want, at least unless the government starts regulating. Salty likes to make it rain. You know what? I do. If I wish that I had the money to where I could give these guys $100 every time or $1,000. You know what? If I was stupid rich like Elon Musk, I would say, hey, let me give this person a home. You know, but instead, what we tend to do with the homeless is, look the other way, literally. Like we see the homeless person there, oop, yeah, I don't want to see that. And if and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to shame anybody, but if you're doing that, I want you to seriously consider what Jesus said about this. Because he does, and this is why I disagreed with Corey on it, is because it's not, it's granted, I know that begging was a different thing 2,000 years ago. Because there were no social programs and stuff like that. And so one of Corey's arguments is that, hey, it's very difficult to be poor in America because there's all these programs to help you if you're poor. Well, I will tell you, those programs are insufficient. I live on Social Security. Well, I don't live on Social Security. I live on Uber because Social Security doesn't pay me enough. And so and this is the thing that really, it's when it comes to these social programs, you know, I am literally working myself to an early grave. I'm pushing myself harder than I should based on what the doctors tell me and all that. Why? Because Social Security doesn't pay enough. And why didn't Social Security not pay enough? Well, because we don't want to take a chance at people defrauding the system. Even though I will tell you, it's very very difficult to defraud Social Security, despite what Elon Musk and Donald Trump tell you. If you're super duper old, like all these people that, they say 150-year-old people getting Social Security, none of those people were getting Social Security, just so you know. Their names simply weren't deleted from the system. And that's because the way that the system works, and it's an old system, sure, but the way that the system works is that in order to be deleted from the system, basically it has to be reported that you've died. And why would it be reported that you died? Well, like in the case when my mom passed away, is because when she died, you have to tell Social Security, hey, this person's dead, stop paying her. And if you don't do that, that's fraud. And so you kind of have to do that. And, that it's pretty much that simple. Once they get the report that that person's dead, they delete them from the system. Now, if you have someone that was, say, when Social Security was first implemented, and they were elderly back then, and keep in mind the work ethic of people back then was a lot different, and so people would not apply for Social Security unless they genuinely needed it. If you never applied for Social Security, then when you died, there was nothing to report to them because you weren't getting a Social Security check, and if you weren't, and so you were just never deleted from the system. That's all it is, right? But at any rate, even if you're over 100 years old, guess what? You have to recertify that you can get Social Security. If you're disabled like myself, I have to recertify that. Every year my doctor has to fill out a mountain of paperwork just to say, yeah, we haven't had a miracle cure for MS yet. I've heard the weird side of YouTube. I've heard of the weird side of YouTube, and boy, was it wild and weird at times. It absolutely was. Now we get too much stuff. Yeah, now it's all a bunch of AI generated crap. Because people have figured out, and unfortunately, like a lot of times, it's companies that, like in China and stuff like that. And what they do is they have these AI systems just pump out video after video after video after video. and they can crank out thousands of videos every day, and all they get a few thousand views each, and bam, they are making a buttload of money, right? And Google doesn't care. Why? Because they're making money. Rocky Horror is good if you like the music. No, I don't. Well, okay, here's my thing about it. I'll be honest with you. I think Rocky Horror is a movie that purposely, knowingly, and intentionally glorifies sexual deviancy. And so I don't think it's good in any circumstance. I don't care if you like the music or not. And, maybe you like that, maybe you don't. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that I kept, especially, no, I can't support a movie like that. Fat Albert versus Shrek. Oh, that's no contest. Fat Albert absolutely decimates Shrek. Don't get me wrong, Shrek is an ogre and superhumanly strong, but I would dare say the Fat Albert is just as strong as Shrek, and Fat Albert is, of course, much fatter than Shrek. Shrek is just a little chunky. Fat Albert versus Fat Bastard from Austin Powers. Yeah, if you use his name, then YouTube will. Well, yeah, that's another word that I probably shouldn't have said it, but yeah, that's another word that can get you in trouble. Even though there's nothing wrong with that word, it's just a description of a person who is born to parents who were unmarried. That's all it really means. But whatever. Anyway, so Fat Albert versus the fat guy from the Austin Powers movies. I'm trying to remember because I didn't care for I'll just say it. I didn't care for Fat Bastard. I really didn't. And I not. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't deeply offended. I just didn't like him, and I thought it was crass just to be crass. But at any rate, I don't remember him having any special abilities. He was just fat. I mean, like, but I could be wrong because I've only seen that was like Austin Powers 2 or 3 that he came into the scene. I don't remember him doing anything superhuman, so I'm going to have to give it to Fat Albert. Sometimes I check the music I listen to. Videos 14 years ago, Europe 480p quality. Europe, well, I don't know what Europe means, YURP. I'm sure it means something, but I'm not sure what it means. Though Tim Curry is my favorite portrayal of all time of the It, even though he was the main character in Rocky Horror. Well, first of all, I don't care about the fact that Tim Curry being the main guy that played Frankenhooker or whatever, Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror. I don't care about that. I mean, Tim Curry, yeah, he was good as It, and if I'm sure he's good in some movies, bad in others. And as far look, there if you just because an actor is in a movie that glorifies sexual deviancy, doesn't mean I'm not going to watch anything else that actor's in. Why? Because you know what? Actors are in Jesus movies and do horrible things. Actors are just genuinely, you know, I want to say they're actors for the most part are narcissistic people who indulge in everything, right? Why? Because they can, right? An actor is a splendid example of the sinful nature of man. An actor is a splendid example of what American society would be if everybody were, in fact, wealthy. We would be nothing but, hookers and cocaine. I mean, that's basically would be our entire society. And while some people would be like, "Hey, that sounds great," of course it sounds great because that's what our sinful nature craves. That's why it sounds great. But that doesn't change the fact that it's sin, and so it should be avoided. If there was no temptation to commit sin, then we would have no difficulty in living a quote unquote righteous life. And but anyway, actors for the most part because they're ridiculously rich and because they're surrounded by people who almost worship them quite literally, then they can do whatever they want. And if you can do whatever you want, you're going to do disgusting things. So I genuinely try to not pay attention to what actors, directors, producers, anybody in Hollywood, I try not to pay attention to what they're doing in their off hours. Because it's going to bother me, and so I don't want to know. And then people say, "Oh, well, this actor is a Christian. Great, that's awesome." Don't tell me anymore because as soon as I start digging into that person, I'm going to see, yeah, they're a Christian in the same way Joel Osteen is a Christian, probably, at best. And so I'm not interested in their personal lives, and I'm not judging an actor and saying he can't be in one. I won't watch him in one thing just because he was in another. And I'm not saying you said this, Robert. I'm just saying since you mentioned the fact that you liked him in it, even though he's the main character in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. To me, it's not an even though issue. It's just they're just two facts about him. Ben Affleck was in the terrible Daredevil movie, and he was the best Batman we've ever seen. So does him being the best Batman I've ever seen make Daredevil a better movie? Or does him being terrible Daredevil make Batman a worse movie? The answer to both is no. All right, so moving on. There are many topics that automatically will cause events. Talk about the cough, 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 boom banner on your video. Talk about self deletion, boom. Talk about link to self deletion prevention. Yeah, and that's all very true. And that's now the COVID thing was really interesting because that was. And by the way, I know everybody thinks, oh, they blame the Biden administration. Newsflash: this happened before the Biden administration. This happened during Trump. And for those of you that aren't content creators, you wouldn't know this, but YouTube sent out emails saying, because people all over the place, right from the beginning, were questioning the government narrative on it. From the very beginning, people were either saying that it was fake, that it really was just a cold or a flu, that it was no big deal, and people to this day argue about whether or not masks do anything. And all that was going on. So YouTube decided to take a stance, or Google decided to take a stance. And they said that if people started, they basically, here's what they started out by saying this. If you want to talk about that, the COVID, then you better be a certified, reliable source of information. In other words, you need to be like a doctor or an official news outlet or something like that. Because if you're not, then your video is going to get taken down. If you are caught spreading what they consider false information, and the problem is, what's false information? Well, that's kind of the whole subject of the discussion, right? But if it's so basically information that they thought was false, you would get taken down. And again, this was not the government telling them to do this. This was Google's own prerogative to do so. And while I fundamentally disagreed with the practice of telling people they can't talk about this particular topic and threatening to take down videos that do, I fundamentally disagree with that. I also acknowledge that Google and YouTube had the absolute right to do so because they are a private organization. Now, I do think that there needs to be some discussion in Washington, D.C. about whether or not Google should be considered a private organization or a public platform. But the problem is if they're a public platform, then it opens up a whole other can of worms. And let me make sure that everything's okay here. Let's just put my small group. All right. Josiah says Batman has beaten and defeated villains way easier than Spider-Man, so Batman can defeat Spider-Man. Okay. So Daredevil has defeated villains way easier than Superman. Therefore, Daredevil can beat Superman. I mean that's not. I don't see the logic there because they're not fighting the same villains. If you want to say that Batman one punched the Joker, while Spider-Man had difficulty against the Green Goblin. But the Green Goblin is basically has a super soldier serum or a variant of coursing through his veins, right? So it's you're comparing apples and oranges, I think. He's just a transsexual from Transylvania. Yeah, I know. It's a dumb song. Or how Scott Adams is a Christian. What do you think about his deathbed conversion to Christianity? I don't know anything about it. I'll be completely honest. I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure I probably do if I look him up. I'm going to look him up. I'm not. I'm not sure off the top of my head who Scott Adams is. American cartoonist and author. He's the Dilbert guy. Okay. So he died in 2026. Oh, he died this year. I didn't know that. In Pleasanton, California. So he was near where I was. Uh, he was American cartoonist, author, and conservative commentator. Okay. Yeah. I've heard of him. I don't know anything about his deathbed conversion, so to speak. And if he did have a deathbed conversion, I hope it was genuine. You know, it's one of those things that deathbed conversions. People always. I try not to give too much stock in it, not because I think that person's lying or that person. It's how reliable is it that it happened in the first place, right? I remember for the longest time, Christopher Hitchens, when he was alive, said there will be no deathbed conversion from him because he was so determined that atheism was correct. Which, fine, I admire his determination on that, even though I think he's wrong and he's going to end up paying the ultimate price for it. But if somebody suddenly said, hey, I was with Christopher Hitchens when he died and he suddenly converted faith to Jesus, I would be extremely skeptical of that. If he did, good for him. I hope to see him in heaven. I would love to debate him because, man, he was a potent debater. But I would not take on the word of an individual that he did it. I would need, that's one of those things that it's between that individual and God, and I really have no business commenting on it. I'm a content creator. I just don't have 1,000 subs. Okay. Well, no, I'm not saying you're not. I'm saying that if you were a content creator at the time that COVID-19 happened, then you probably got the email. All right, because they sent it to all of us at the time. They wanted to make it very clear you will not talk about it. Though Tim Allen seems to be a stand-up guy, his career did suffer certain values for certain values he stood up for. He was against the modern-day Hollywood narrative. So whenever an actor and here's the thing: when an actor stands up and bites the hand that feeds them, and then they suffer for it, I don't feel bad for don't get me wrong, Tim Allen, I'm sure he's a great guy. I don't feel bad if he gets in trouble for saying things that he knows will get him in trouble. So it's like when people freaked out over the Gina Carano thing, right? When Gina Carano started posting on Twitter all the conservative memes and stuff, and then she got in trouble for it. Well, she didn't even get in trouble for it. She just didn't get a job she thought she was going to get from Disney. So it sucks for her, but you shouldn't have been out there spouting your mouth when if you're going to be an actor, what the heck, guys, really? If you want to be an actor and you want to be successful, don't spout conservative politics. Keep your mouth shut. Now, granted, is that the Christian thing to do? No. But you know what? Gina Carano wasn't talking about God. She wasn't talking about Jesus, and neither was Tim Allen, right? These people were talking about conservative politics. And I'm sorry. Keep it's not I can be free to talk about what I want because I don't work for anybody right now other than Uber, and even with Uber, I've spoken out against some of the things that I've seen with Uber because I'm not afraid of them because technically I'm not an employee of theirs. However, I'll be honest, in the not too distant future, if things go the way that I'm planning, I will have to censor myself on a couple of topics. Topics that I like talking about. And I don't want to censor myself on these topics, but I will have to in order to play the long game, if you will. And I don't know if I've talked about my plans there online, so I'll just leave it at that. Did you get vaxxed? I didn't want to, but my brother had a baby and wouldn't let me visit unless I got the jab. Well, first of all, I don't call it the jab, it's the vaccination, all right? So there's no need to use derogatory terms towards it. That just, whenever somebody says the jab or something like it just tells me, okay, I know where you stand, you know. But yes, I did. And I'm not ashamed of that, nor am I proud of it. It's just something I did. But keep in mind, I have a compromised immune system. I suffer from an immunodisorder, right? And so it would be stupid for me to not get vaccinated. And all the hyperbole over the vaccination was just ridiculous, right? And some of the initial stuff was people were freaking out because the vaccination didn't prevent you from necessarily getting or carrying the disease. That's not how vaccinations work. Yes, this is not your typical type of vaccination. It's a little different, but it's none of the vaccinations work that way. There's no guarantee. If you take the polio vaccination, there's no guarantee you won't get polio. It just severely lowers your risk, right? Because it hopefully, if the vaccination works in your system, then your body develops antibodies for that disease, right? That's the whole point of a vaccination. And so, but it doesn't work in 100% of people. And so, and by the way, if you have antibodies to fight the disease, means you still technically contract the disease, but your body can fight it off. And so, people really, really got in this whole tither about it. They thought that somehow getting the vaccination was supposed to be like a deflector shield around your body, preventing you from ever contracting the disease. That's not how vaccinations work, and that's not how they ever worked. However, and side effects. Are there side effects to vaccinations? Yes, there are side effects to every chemical you stick in your body. If you were to give anything to everybody on planet Earth, some of those people will have adverse effects. And I mean anything. How many people in this country, let alone in the world, have a peanut allergy? Right? That would be a side effect of taking peanuts, right? A certain percentage of people have an adverse reaction. And so the same, like you give somebody caffeine, right? Like I got my coffee right here. The vast majority of people that drink coffee will experience the effect of an induced awareness and ability to function cognitively. In other words, it makes you more awake and alert, right? That's the normal effect. In a smaller percentage of people, such as myself, unfortunately, it has almost the exact opposite effect, right? I could drink a cup of coffee and go right to bed. It's just relaxing to me. And yet other people will find caffeine will make them sick to their stomach. It's a negative side effect, right? So it's actually, it's not just the COVID-19 vaccination. It's true of everything. Now, different things have more severe reactions. But, like peanuts, some people will die from eating peanuts. Other people just like the, delicious, quote unquote, delicious taste of peanuts. Yes, Dilbert. Just died of prostate cancer a week ago. That sucks. Was always a religious skeptic. But fans convinced him to accept Jesus Christ before death, just in case. Well, you see, that right there tells me that okay, if what you just said is 100% true, then I would say that was not a sincere conversion. You can't accept Jesus just in case. You either accept him or you don't. It's not, well, in case hell is real, all right, Jesus, I'll accept you. That's not an acceptance of Christ, right? Because you don't believe it in your heart. You're just saying, oh, well, just in case. So that's a dangerous statement. And yeah, and caught that, just in case, not the right words. Nightwing versus Daredevil. I think Daredevil, okay, so they both use, it's kind of interesting, they both use similar primary weapons. Now, Nightwings are like equipped with like tasers. Daredevils are just blunt instruments. But so you would think Edge Nightwing there. Nightwing is probably better trained than Daredevil as far as because Daredevil was trained by a clandestine group of ninjas. Nightwing was trained by Batman, literally the greatest martial arts in the world in the DC universe. So I think Nightwing has the edge as far as his equipment is a little more lethal and his training is superior. But what Nightwing doesn't have and Daredevil does is superpowers. So Daredevil has hyper fast reflexes, agility, and the ability to see 360 degrees at all times. Well, see virtually because he doesn't see, he has his echolocation kind of sense. And so, because of that, I think Daredevil wins. He's simply, you can't compensate for the guy having superpowers. Yeah, I worry about the suggestion of long term vaccination side effects. So far, so good, at least. Well, here's the problem with that, Stan. You could say that about literally anything. Okay. Do you take any prescriptions? And especially if something is a relatively new discovery. So, like I'll be honest with you. If let's say that the FDA approved tomorrow a new drug that treats MS and could totally turn my life around, would I take it? Probably. Would there be a risk of side effects? Absolutely. And that is true of every drug. And so, do I worry? Because I take a dozen prescriptions. Do I worry every day that, oh my gosh, like here, right here, I'm actually due to take, these are three of my prescriptions, right? This one is pregabalin. It's for neurological pain. This one, I can't remember the name of it, but it's to help reduce the size of your prostate because I got a little bit of a problem there. And this one is blood pressure medication, right? So, do I worry about the fact that any one of these could have long term side effects? No. I don't, and the reason I don't worry about it is not because there's no possibility that I could suffer from these long term side effects. It's because I believe that God is in control. And I also believe that God gave us medicine. Now, is it possible that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, I'm going to die from some side effect caused by some medication that I'm taking yet today? Absolutely. And if that does happen, well, then that's just the way it was meant to be. Breakfast of Champions. COVID wise, I was mostly surprised how quick the scientists and the money got together within months. Begin with the major defense. Well, actually, that's the funny thing. It wasn't. That was kind of so. And this is one of those things. Look, I'm not trying to knock on Trump. I do that enough, but Trump was big on saying how everything. I saw this thing. His new healthcare plan is called the Great Healthcare Plan. needs a better name, buddy. But but Trump has this thing where he always wants people to think that he is doing something well beyond what anybody else has ever done, right? And he's always says that whatever he does is the greatest of all time, that it's beyond anybody's expectations, that many people are saying how awesome he is, blah 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 blah. So, same is true with the vaccine, which is ironic because when Trump was president, all the MAGA types were talking about how awesome the vaccine's going to be, and then it wasn't distributed until Biden took over. So all of a sudden, the vaccine has got tracking devices and will kill you and make you grow 3 limbs and all this other crap, right? So it's all political. But but the vaccine, I actually talked to my orthopedic surgeon. His dad was part of the Moderna research team, and we talked about it for some time. And because when I got my knee surgery, it was my orthopedic surgeon, and he and I talked about it quite a bit. And it turns out they've been working on a coronavirus vaccine, and that's all. Remember, COVID-19 is simply what it means is it's the 2019 variant of the coronavirus, right? And so, even though they keep saying, "Oh, well, this is the Omega variant or whatever," really, what they should be saying is Corona 20, 21, 22, 20. Like this year, if we have a new vaccine come out this year, it should be for Corona 26. But they don't want to do that. They want to call it the Corona X Factor 32 or whatever. But I don't care. But at any rate, they've been working on the coronavirus vaccine since the SARS outbreak. SARS, for those of you that don't know, is the severe acute respiratory syndrome, and which was basically COVID 1, meaning 2001. The first known cases appeared in November 2002 in China, and there was a global outbreak in 2003 of SARS. SARS was the coronavirus, the same virus as COVID 19. And so they had been working on a vaccine ever since the SARS outbreak in 2002. And COVID didn't hit until 2019. So the vaccine was in heavy research mode for well over a decade. The reason they didn't have a vaccine ready to go as soon as the outbreak happened, because for example, if this were an outbreak of influenza, right? It would, they basically, as soon as the labs were able to get a sample of the new influenza virus, they could modify their vaccine, and it would be like maybe within a month or two we would have the new vaccine out. However, the reason that didn't happen with COVID was because they didn't have the protection level where they wanted it to be for a vaccine. I don't know. I'm pulling numbers out of the air because I don't remember. He told me, but I can't remember what it was. And so, let's say for a vaccine to be considered viable, they want it to be, I think it's something like 95 to 98% effective, meaning that at least 95% of people that get the vaccine then get an effective immunity to the virus. That's what they want. However, in the case of the COVID vaccine, it was in like the 89, 90 range. And so it wasn't quite where they wanted it to be. And so they couldn't release it as a vaccine until it reached those minimum acceptable levels. That's what they were working on. And so that, honestly, so at the time that the outbreak was first reported, they already had it, the vaccine close to where we had it when we actually got it. So, but you would think if you just paid attention to the news conferences that Trump initiated the research on these vaccines. They'd been going for, decades under multiple presidents, right? Because you think about it, that means that the COVID research was going on under Bush, Obama, Trump, and finished under Biden. And it's still going today because every year, they're constantly researching because if there's a new outbreak or a new variant of the virus, they want to update the vaccines. And guess what? I get the vaccine shot every year. I get the flu shot, and I didn't used to get flu shots and stuff like that when I was younger, but now that I have a compromised immune system, I do because I'm not stupid. Sorry, long-winded thing on that. There is, let's see. So if there is what they can try to deal with, I think that's a major problem. That is good now. If only that energy was used more. Well, like I said, I think that people misunderstand that vaccine was under research for a long time. So who has gotten Mint Mobile because Ryan Reynolds, owner and spokesperson? Not me, but then again, I'll tell you, I used to work for Verizon Wireless, and I still have Verizon Wireless. Not because I think Verizon is superior. I do happen to think Verizon is superior, but not because of that. I still have Verizon Wireless because I get the employee discount, even though I don't work for them anymore. And that's one of the best things about that company. And I will praise them all day long. There's a lot of things I didn't like about the company, but I think the best thing about that company is that if you were working for Verizon Wireless and you leave due to becoming disabled, as I did, then they treat you like an employee for the rest of your life. My wife gets her health insurance from Verizon Wireless to this day, and she will continue to get it as long as I'm disabled. And I actually get health benefits from them as well, but not in the same way because since I get Medicare instead of the standard plan, I get a Medicare supplementary program from them, and so that is so cool. I can't praise them enough for that. Lore Reloaded dropped by. I don't know if you're still here, Lore, but it says, I'll have to censor myself on a couple of topics. Yeah, things aren't the way they were in the days of the fandom menace. Got to be more professional. I'll tell you, well, the fandom menace, that, even that, I'll tell you, Lore, if you're still here, the Phantom Menace thing started around the time of the launch of Discovery, which is the time I launched this channel. It wasn't, Google was still well in control of YouTube, and censorship, the Google style of algorithmic censorship was well underway. So you couldn't talk about a lot of things even then. It's like, I think, go back to the days of Losoyo and Rational Roundtable engaging with various atheists. That was, I think, a better day. Muttley the Cowardly Dog. Muttley versus Courage the Cowardly Dog. Oh, that goes to Muttley hands down. Look, Courage is, I know has gone through a lot of adventures and solved a lot of issues over his day. But Muttley is a straight up evil psychopath that will kill you. So I think Muttley is the winner there. Mr. Potts, good to see you, my friend, says, won't be able to see Nerd Fights tonight if there is one. Can you give me a rating on Academy? Whew. Okay, I haven't actually tried to rate Academy. I would say better than I expected. Not great. I just so you know, I put it in the middle of the new Trek. So I would rank the new Trek as Strange New Worlds, then Lower Decks, then Academy, then Picard, and finally at the bottom Discovery. So honestly, I would probably give it a 6 out of 10, maybe a 6.5, but time will tell. Every medication has long-term side effects. Not well, true. Not just every chemical you put in your body has long-term side effects. It's just that not everybody experiences those long-term side effects. That's the whole thing about side effects, is that it's a percentage of people that get them. Tarzan versus Spear from Primal. I would say Spear from Primal gets that one. Tarzan, is a very capable warrior and all that, but Spear is, I think, is beyond normal human ability, and I think they try to make it out that, like, since he's, I don't know, he's a Neanderthal or whatever, so he's physically superior. Which, by the way, is kind of interesting. I know that there's still, and most people have Neanderthal DNA in them. But, Neanderthal man was apparently superior to modern man in pretty much every way. Bigger brain, stronger, yeah, in every way superior. The question is, A or B? If medicine can make life a little bit easier now, is that worth potential problems later? Well, it depends on it is one of those things where, like with everything, like when I talk to my neurologist all the time. So I'll give you an example. Some of the medication, like since MS is a neurological condition, the medications I take, particularly the Ocrevus and pregabalin, are particularly geared towards your nervous system and trying to combat pain and other symptoms of MS. Well, one of the side effects is involuntary twitching, right? And I do get that a little bit, right? And that can be permanent, right? It may be that I get little twitches and spasms for the rest of my life. And I knew that was a potential side effect because the doctor tells you I knew it was a potential side effect from the beginning. I see it and I continue to take the medication. Why? Because if I stop taking the medication, then as bad as I feel now, I feel way worse without the medication. So it is worth it to me. And unfortunately, if you have a chronic condition, those are decisions you have to make on a daily basis. Just take medications for the side effects and the meds for the side effects of those. Okay. Doctors here try to get you to use as little medication as possible because, yes, having medicine for a side effect that causes another side effect that causes another side effect isn't worth it. Look, I believe that you should put as few chemicals into your body as possible. But I also understand, like for example, chemotherapy, which is literally injecting deadly chemicals into your body, right, in order to attempt to kill the cancer cells. Chemotherapy is terrible for you. It makes you sick. It makes you does all sorts of bad side effects. And coupled with radiation therapy, you end up losing your hair. You end up, it just wreaks havoc on you. However, if it kills the cancer, it's definitely worth it. Now, as far as the medications that I take, we're constantly tweaking them because we don't want me taking more medicine than I have to, but we do want to take everything that has a net positive effect. These days, doctors here are like quality matters. Well, I agree with that philosophy, and unfortunately, in America, it's a two-sided thing. I think my doctors care very much about quality of life as the number one thing, and that includes taking into account potential side effects and all that. However, the insurance companies, including and especially, in fact, Medicare, are very particular about, well, we don't want this person to. Like, I take a medication for cognitive function. Why? Because early on, when in my MS, I started losing cognitive function. It was terrifying. I can't even tell you how, because I'm a relatively intelligent guy, and I could feel my intelligence slipping. It was absolutely horrifying to me. And so my neurologist uh, gave me a prescription for a medication. I believe it's Donzepil that can be used. It's primarily prescribed to dementia patients to try and slow down the progression of dementia or Alzheimer's. And so I was like, great, I'll try it. And so, but guess what? Medicare was like, or not Medicare, but actually it's Express Scripts. I'm sorry, but they were like, you can't have it. I was like, why not? And so, because you don't have dementia. I'm like, no, I have MS, and the studies show that it is effective on MS patients as well. And they said, well, yeah, but you will only approve it if you have dementia. That's where I think in the American system, one of the big problems is that bureaucrats at healthcare companies and regulators in the government who have no medical background are the ones making life and death decisions for people like me. So for me, my solution is simple. I pay out of pocket for that medication. So I pay full price. I have another medication. I'm out of it right now, and I'm hoping to get some soon. But because it's so much, it costs me too dang much. It's $80 a month, and it's an effective medication to help me with some of my neurological symptoms. But the insurance companies won't cover it. Stormtroopers versus Starship Troopers. Oh, Starship. Look, Stormtroopers are going to lose pretty much every battle. The Stormtroopers are the worst military infantry unit, I think. I can't think of anybody that's really worse. I'm sure there is somebody worse. Maybe the Spaceballs. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I found out that I'm non-alcoholic fatty liver. There's nothing modern medicine can do for it. Only certain changes in my diet can help. Modern medicine, go figure. Well, there are some things that we simply can't cure yet. You know, not everything has a pill you can pop to fix it. I love, like in Star Trek 4 when McCoy just gives that lady a pill and she grows a new kidney, right? Maybe one day we'll get to that point. But right now, medicine has limits. And there are lots of, there are conditions that doctors have no idea what the heck it is, or why it happens. And there are lots of things that, MS is technically one of them. MS, there is no direct treatment or cure for MS. There are chemicals that they can give you that they know will treat the symptoms, and there are chemicals they can give you that the studies show will slow down the progression of MS. But there is no direct treatment for MS. There's no cure for MS. Not right now. And part of the problem is they don't even know what MS essentially is. They know its symptoms, they know what it does, but they don't know what is the root cause. And that's a big problem, because if you don't know what's causing it, you can't very well cure it. And in fact, even to get an MS diagnosis is not an easy process. I will tell you, it took me, close to a year to get the diagnosis, and it cost thousands of dollars of various medical procedures to do it, to get the actual diagnosis, which is another problem with the American healthcare system. Let's see. COVID and friends are all based on upon the common cold. So yeah, we won't get rid of that ever. I don't think they're based on the common cold because they are different viruses. But the funny thing about viruses is that, to my knowledge, I don't know if they're. Let me look real quick because I don't want to misspeak. There we go. Yeah, there's no such thing as a cure for viruses. There are two viruses that have been eradicated due to inoculation, basically getting it to the point where it can no longer reproduce at all. That's smallpox in humans, and it says, and rinderpest in ruminants. I don't even know what that is. But polio, technically, not eliminated yet, even though it's unheard of in most of the modern world. But yeah, we can't cure viruses. We antiviruses work to a point, but there's no like, oh hey, you got this, psst, give you that, and you're fine. Doesn't work that way. Robert says, I'm a type 2 diabetic, also still, after all these years, diabetic research, still no cure for modern medicine. Go figure. Well, yeah, diabetes is another one. Like my wife is a type 2 diabetic. It's funny. People joke about, oh, well, that person's fat, and so they get diabetes. Honestly, while being obese can trigger diabetes, it's not it's another one of those things where there's limits to where the scientific research goes. People tend to worship, and this is one of my big things that I have a problem with. We worship scientists, and we worship and we practice scientism. It's a real thing. We think that everything can be answered through science. That's simply not true. Science is the more you learn about science, the more you realize how little we know. Because things like diabetes, MS, tons of autism, all these things, we have no freaking idea, right? We don't. We have no clue. We have ways to try to treat them. And so, like with diabetes, we know that your insulin resistance is severely affected and stuff like that. And so, what do? Well, we come up with synthetic insulin, and we monitor your blood sugar, so you know that, hey, if you're feeling woozy, check your blood sugar. Maybe it's too high or too low. You know, but none of that is understanding what caused it in the first place. There's no way to, we know that, okay, your chances of becoming a type 2 diabetic are lower if you're physically fit. But guess what? You can get type 2 diabetes and be an Olympic athlete. And you could go through your entire life looking like Fat Albert and not get diabetes. Like, I don't have diabetes, and I weigh over 100 pounds more than I should, right? And so it's not the being obese is a trigger, and in some cases, because of the way the diabetes works, it can be a symptom of diabetes, but it is not the root cause. And so, what is the root cause? Unknown, and we need to work on that. But I do, I do hate that, like when people they'll see a fat person and say, "Oh, that person's going to get diabetes," because or somebody eats too much sugar. Oh, that's going to give them diabetes. No, it's not work. That's not how it works. Do you know the Muffin Man? As a matter of fact, I do. He lives right down the street. What preschool shows did your kids watch? Ooh, I seem to remember Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer. Gosh, but then other than that, I'm kind of drawing a blank. Oh, come on, that is a low blow. Some of my friends are space bars. I assume you mean space balls. Weird. I haven't heard much about them for a few years. Well, I do know that they're supposedly working on a sequel. Schwan or Sean says, hello, Michael in chat. I changed my YouTube name. Used to be Schwario. Yeah, I recognize. I was going to say I thought you were Schwario based on the picture of the seagull there. Robert says, a new government food pyramid is a big step in the right direction, finally. I don't know what the new government food pyramid is. I don't care. Because you know what? It'll be wrong sooner or later. I think that if you want to look at what should humans eat, I think that ideally, if you just look at humans in their native habitat, what did they eat? Right? They ate, fresh fruits and vegetables seasonally. They ate things like nuts and berries seasonally, and they ate meat year round of various types, right? So, for example, if you were an ancient person in the area now known as Scotland, your diet would consist, as far as your meat, would consist of lamb, beef, and salmon, right? And if and so you don't really I don't think the food pyramid is even necessary. The problem is that we eat so much hyper processed foods that it's destroying us, right? So we're and I will tell you that I am not, I'm certainly not nobody's health guru. I've made a couple of changes in my diet to where I eat. I love pasta, always have, and I still love pasta. But you know what? I don't eat bleached flour pasta anymore, where I can avoid it. Instead, I eat whole grain pastas made from whole wheat and stuff like that, organic if I can get it. Why? Because it's better for you. So I would say eat as close to natural foods as you possibly can and eat what a human being ought to eat. And I'm sorry, back, 2,000 years ago when people were actually having to depend on nature for their food, trees did not have Hershey bars on them. I have type 2 diabetes too. I'm also know non-obese people that have type 2 diabetes, yes. Spaceballs 2, The Search for Money. That'd be a good title for it. Well, actually, I think one that The Search for More Money was what they joked about in the movie. I'm not sure if it's going to be good, but who knows? We'll see. For a couple of years now, I've been subscribed to Beat Diabetes YouTube channel. Dennis Pollock is a retired evangelist. Also, he met his wife while he was in Nigeria several years ago. He has a Bible YouTube channel also. Cool. And if you're Canadian, you eat a lot of beaver. I could say something there that would be a horrible, dirty joke, but I won't. We'll just say you don't want to get mouth cancer. So Canadians, be careful. All right. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm late. I gotta have breakfast and then hit the road. And then hopefully I will see all you guys tonight on Nerd Fights.